The first sound that broke through the chatter of the boarding line wasn't the hum of engines. It was a snap of fingers. "Excuse me." "He's in my seat." The tone was firm, polished, used to being obeyed. Heads turned. Row 2 went still. A tall black man in a charcoal jacket looked up from his ticket, eyebrows slightly raised. "2A," he said softly, showing the boarding pass. The woman in pearl earrings gave a patient smile, the kind reserved for service workers who take too long. "Yes, dear, but this is first class." Around them, passengers exchanged uneasy glances. The flight attendant hovered, flustered, unsure whether to intervene or wait for conflict. The man didn't argue. He just said, "It's fine. I'll stand until you're settled." The calm in his voice made the tension sharper. She thought she'd taken a seat. She'd actually just boarded a lesson. The aircraft smelled of coffee and new upholstery. Passengers shuffled luggage, pretending not to watch. The attendant offered to check the manifest again, but the woman waved her off. "People mix up numbers all the time," she said brightly, placing her handbag in the overhead bin. The man stepped aside, tucking his ticket into his jacket pocket. No sigh, no frown, just stillness, the kind that makes guilt echo louder. At the front, the cockpit door opened. A pilot in crisp uniform stepped out to greet boarding passengers. He looked up, saw the man by the galley, and froze. "Sir," he said quietly, breaking into a grin. "Good to see you again." The woman blinked. The attendant blinked. The man simply nodded. "Always good to fly with you, Captain." A whisper rippled down the aisle. "Who was he?" As the plane filled, a teenage boy 2 rows back raised his phone discreetly, recording. Not for gossip, but because he could sense something real unfolding. One of those moments adults talk about later as if it were small when it wasn't. The seat dispute was over, but the story hadn't even taken off yet. If your heart's racing right now, take a breath and hit subscribe. Because stories like this prove grace can land smoother than pride. The man's name was Daniel Hart. To most people, he was just another passenger. But within the aviation world, he was the founder and chief executive of SkyVista Air, a growing airline built from the ground up over 15 years. He'd started as a mechanic, then an engineer, then an investor in routes no one else believed in, towns and communities ignored by major carriers. Once every month, Daniel flew incognito on random routes to see what customers saw, to feel the service the way everyone else did. It was his quiet ritual. He preferred humility. It kept him sharp. But this morning, humility was being tested like never before. The woman, Madison Clark, according to her boarding pass, kept up polite conversation with the man beside her, commenting on ticket prices and the decline in professionalism. Her voice carried just enough to reach Daniel's ears. He didn't react. Years in business had taught him that pride only wins short battles. Patience wins wars. As the plane prepared for takeoff, a soft announcement came over the speaker. "Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be departing shortly. Please ensure your devices are in airplane mode." Daniel moved toward the back to give space, leaning quietly against the bulkhead. He didn't miss the curious glances or the half-smiles that flickered when people assumed they understood the story. He smiled too, faintly. Noted, he thought. Plenty to review on staff empathy training. He'd built an airline to make everyone feel welcome. Now, he was learning what welcome really looked like. 10 minutes later, turbulence rattled the seatbelt signs. The captain's voice returned, steady and calm. "We'll have a brief hold on departure clearance, folks. Sit tight." In that pause, the flight attendant approached the man quietly. "Sir, may I see your ticket one more time?" He handed it over without hesitation. She studied it, eyes widening. Then she turned to Madison. "Ma'am, it appears your seat is actually 2C, not 2A. Madison frowned. "That can't be right. My assistant booked this weeks ago." Before the conversation could escalate, the captain emerged from the cockpit again. His tone was soft but final. "It's right, ma'am. And I'd appreciate it if Mr. Hart took his seat now." The name hit like sudden turbulence. Madison's jaw slackened. "Mr. Hart?" "Yes, ma'am," the captain said, glancing at Daniel. "Mr. Daniel Hart, the owner of SkyVista Air." For a moment, the hum of the cabin dimmed under the sound of collective realization. The teenage boy's camera caught the exact instant the world flipped. The woman's blush, the man's calm, the silence that said everything. Madison stammered. I didn't realize, Daniel smiled gently. That's the point. She wanted a better seat. He'd just shown her what better really means. The engines roared and the aircraft lifted through low clouds. Silence spread through the cabin. No one dared small talk. Madison stared out the window, face pale, fingers tightening on the armrest. The flight attendant approached softly. Would you like to switch seats, sir? Daniel shook his head. Let her stay. I'll take the aisle. His voice carried no anger, only calm authority. The teenager's phone still recorded, his mother whispering, Put that away. But she didn't stop him. There was something in the air larger than gossip, something about fairness, dignity, and how easily both get misplaced 30,000 feet up. The plane climbed, but pride had already hit turbulence. Madison swallowed, finally turning to him. Mr. Hart, I can't tell you how sorry I am. He looked at her kindly. You don't need to apologize to me, he said. You need to remember this feeling when you talk to someone who can't correct you. She nodded, unable to reply. For the rest of the flight, she stayed quiet. Daniel opened a tablet, reviewing staff reports. Between charts and emails, he thought about how many unseen passengers experience smaller versions of this moment every day. Disrespect softened by smiles, justified by habit. He made a note. New initiative. Customer empathy retraining. Halfway through the flight, the captain stepped out again, coffee in hand. Always good to have you aboard, sir, he said for the cabin to hear. Your company's been good to us. Daniel smiled, lowering his voice. Let's make sure we're just as good to them. Kindness sounds quiet, but it travels farther than jet noise. When the plane began its descent into Los Angeles, sunlight spilled through the windows, gold and forgiving. The captain came over the intercom, thanking passengers for choosing SkyVista Air. A few seats back, someone whispered, that man owns the whole airline. Another whispered back. He never even raised his voice. The teenager stopped recording at last. He looked at his mother. He was calm the whole time, he said. She nodded. That's what power looks like. At the gate, passengers stood gathering luggage. Madison lingered until the aisle cleared. She turned to Daniel, voice trembling. I'll remember this, I promise. He smiled gently. Good, remember the wings on our logo. They're for everyone. She hesitated, then offered her hand. He shook it once, firm but kind, and stepped into the jet bridge. Outside the terminal windows, ground crews moved in rhythm, guiding planes like choreography. Daniel watched them for a long moment before heading to his connecting flight. A new program idea was already forming, free mentorship sessions for young pilots from underrepresented backgrounds. He could already see the slogan, "Every seat has sky above it." Some lessons land harder than turbulence, but they always bring people down safely. A week later, a video appeared online titled, "Woman Takes CEO's Seat, Learns the Hard Way Who He Is." It spread faster than news bulletins. Comments flooded in. The way he handled it. Pure class. Grace under pressure should be taught in schools. The airline issued no press release. They didn't need to. The story spoke for itself. Madison never gave an interview. But months later, a quiet donation arrived at the SkyVista Foundation, enough to fund scholarships for 5 aviation students. The note attached simply read, "For the wings you reminded me to see." Daniel continued his monthly flights, always incognito. He sat in middle rows, listened more than he spoke, and thanked crew members by name. When attendants apologized for delays or turbulence, he smiled. You can't control the wind, he'd say, only the way you fly through it. Respect doesn't need recognition. It needs repetition. On a winter morning nearly a year later, Daniel boarded another routine flight. As he placed his briefcase under the seat, the attendant whispered, "Welcome back, Mr. Hart." He smiled, shaking his head. "Just Daniel today." Through the oval window, dawn stretched across the runway, soft light turning aluminum wings into mirrors. Somewhere behind him, someone laughed, someone sighed. And the world kept moving forward. True leadership, he thought, isn't sitting in first class. It's building a world where everyone belongs there. The plane rolled forward, wheels humming, lifting into a new day. Respect, he'd learned, never needs an upgrade. It's already first class. Subscribe.